Welcome to Transformational Leadership, the podcast for leaders building high-performance organizations and teams. In every episode, you will hear from executives and transformation experts who've led with vision, executed under pressure, and delivered real, scalable, and impactful results. You'll hear practical insights and leadership stories from executives who've driven change, delivering transformation, and consistently winning in highly complex environments. No fluff, just frameworks, lessons, and stories from the front lines of leadership. If you're serious about building competitive impact through people, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Jeff Harnois.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Transformational Leadership. I'm your host, Jeff Harnois. You're going to want to stick around for this one. Our guest today is Valerie Workman, attorney turned Chief Human Resources Officer, and I can't wait to hear about that journey and transformation. She's currently the CHRO at Empower Pharmacy, who is doing some really interesting work in the pharmaceutical industry. Valerie was invited to the Forbes Women in Power Summit, something that she's proud about, and we'll ask her about that in this episode today. She also won the Diversity Champion Award at St. John's University School of Law. And one of the interesting things that we're going to talk about, in fact, we'll start our conversation today talking about her role at Tesla when COVID hit. With that, everyone, Valerie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff, I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's an honor to have you here. You spent a little over 4 years at Tesla, and it turns out you were there when COVID hit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to start by how I landed at Tesla. I was working in Atlanta. I was vice president of legal for a major global company. But I felt something was missing and I wanted to, give back. And I thought, what company do I want to work for that I can actually go and change the world? And this is December 2017 when I had that thought. And I thought Tesla was the only place I wanted to go. And I wanted to pursue a career. The next step for me would have been chief compliance officer. And so I joined Tesla as their head of compliance, fully intent on being named chief compliance officer within, the ordinary course of my career there. I was there for 2 years, wonderful career, helped lay the foundation for the compliance for the Shanghai Gigafactory in China. So the ultimate from a compliance role. But then I became the executive sponsor for Black at Tesla. And I started hearing from engineers, not just from Black engineers, but from all engineers across the company, we could be doing things better for employees. And I started to think, okay, I've got this great career. I'm doing fine. I couldn't be better. I'm a rock star at the company. I'm doing well at this tech bro world, but I started to speak up and I started to share, we could be doing things better. Though the messaging that I started sharing got to the CEO, and I got a text one day and said the CEO wanted to see me. And I thought I was going to be fired. I was sure I was going to be fired. And in fact, I called my husband and I told my husband, bologna sandwiches, which is our code word for our integrity is on the line. We may have to sacrifice some compensation and we may go back to our struggle meal, bologna sandwiches. That was our code word. He said, what's the matter? I said, I'm going to see Elon. And he said, okay, well, bologna sandwiches it is. I got you. I support you. But when I went to see the CEO, he asked me, I hear you think there are things we should be doing better. What are they? And I said, well, when you hire the head of HR, these are the things that this person should be doing. Because remember, I'm looking at that chief compliance officer role. I'm doing it in function. I just wanted the title. And I read to him the things I thought we should be doing as a company. Globally, we were 45,000 at the time. He says, okay, so you want to lead HR? And it was a question, but not a question. And I thought, I did not want that job. But when you speak up and you say something, you have to be able to do something. And I said yes. And that was December 2019. I became the head of HR for the US and for every place except for China at the time. And 2 weeks later, I got an email from Environmental Health Safety SVP. And she said, Valerie, I need you on the coronavirus task force. And so I was leading 700 people, all HR functions, about 4 months before COVID hit. But Tesla knew it was coming because we had the Shanghai office and that SVP was spot on. I was leading Tesla during COVID.
Wow. What a phenomenal story. And a couple of things are coming up for me. The first one that just resonates, literally vibrates through me is this idea of integrity. when I think of leadership, certainly when I think of transformation, but when I think of leadership in general, integrity is in many ways one of the most important attributes to have. And you've codified it. Uh, you've got language around it. You've got, deal making language with your husband. That's how ingrained it is in you. I love every bit about that. The second thing about your story that really resonated with me, Valerie, is there's an element of opportunistic or opportunism here. You weren't even thinking about being the CHRO. That wasn't even on your radar. And when Elon presented it, you were, mentally ready to make a major transformation of your own. I mean, the significance of it, again, from my perspective, is you were on a track and you were focused on a destination. And in a moment, that transformed and then ultimately changed the trajectory of your life, I'm guessing.
Completely changed my life, changed my career, changed everything. It changed everything. And two things I really want to point out here that people miss in this story. I got that nod because I spoke up. And people tend to miss that. People tend to miss that. So because I spoke up and became visible, and I spoke up in a way that I think thought was palatable to the CEO and within the culture, but I was very clear that we could be doing better. So not remaining silent. And by that time in my career, that was not me at all. I was not a person to remain silent. And so, there's this phrase I like, your gifts will make room for you. It really opened doors. Speaking up opened the door. And then when you speak up, what's interesting about that, you don't know what door will open. But when that door opens, the second part is you have to take the leap of faith to walk through. I had now as a compliance officer, of course, I worked with HR for decades. I work with finance, so auditing, complaints, investigations. I had all of that background, but there was a lot I did not have. I mean, let's be honest. I had not led talent. I had not led recruiting. I had not led L&D. I was leading, from a small team to leading 700 people. So there were a ton of things I had not done. But here's what I also knew as a leader. And I'm going to, be a little spicy here. Typically, in my experience, when men are offered roles for which they have no experience, they don't hesitate.
Yeah, exactly right.
They see the opportunity and they say to themselves, I will become ready to do that thing. But I will take the role and then I will excel in it. Women typically do not. Women typically question themselves. And if they haven't done that thing, they're reluctant to take the role because they haven't already done it. I did not have that issue. I was not, because I had seen people get roles in Excel. So I was not concerned. I knew I could do that job. The question was that I wanted. I was not concerned as to whether I could do it.
You know what again, what's coming up for me in this, one of the things that I often tell my clients, because courage is required to lead. And when we're talking about transformation, there's often a bit of unknown, which, creates fear. You have to have the courage to lean in. And so one of my own personal mantras is I'm not intimidated by what I don't know. I'm not intimidated because I know my ability to know. And so that allows me to do exactly what you said, to be able to say, yeah, I don't know about this thing, or I haven't done it before. But in many ways, that's the excitement of the opportunity. I have an opportunity to go learn more, to go expand and test my own skills and competencies, in new arenas. And so anyway, that sort of aligns with what you were talking about in making that distinction between men and women. I think if I were to just off the top of my head, think about what causes women to hold back when those opportunities are being presented, or to not see the opportunity. I think it comes down to a priority and a preference of competency, of getting it right, and not knowing that they can get it right often prevents them from moving forward. And so I think, again, it comes down to this idea. Courage may be the wrong word in this case. It may just be confidence in yourself, in your own ability to learn and gain the skills that are needed.
I love that you're making that distinction because women are almost always courageous. I mean, we always have been, but confidence is a different dynamic. And I think you're so right. That's the distinction. And I can speak from my direct experience. I don't want to be empirical, but I will say, in my experience, the challenge for women is the suffering from imposter syndrome. And I know there are two schools of thought, and there are a lot of arguments over whether or not this exists. But I will say I had it early in my career, so I know it exists. And the challenge is when women are invited or find themselves in certain rooms, they question whether or not they belong there. They start questioning themselves. Do I have enough skills? Do I have enough experience? I haven't been here long enough. Does everybody in the room know more than me? And all these voices, these negative voices are playing in our heads, and it impedes with our ability to say yes in the moment you need to say yes. When Elon asked me that question, this was not something I was going to be able to go home and think about, or can I phone a friend? In that moment, in that second, I had to have confidence in my abilities to say yes in that moment. And also what helped was, I'm sort of threading the needle here. What also helped was I was so self-centered on my career up until that point that it was all about me. This was an opportunity to look beyond myself and say, okay, Valerie, it's time to give back. There are 44,000 people in this company, and you may not be able to do everything. You may only be able to do one thing, but you can pivot your career to look beyond yourself. So I will say, now women don't suffer from that part. We are always giving and we're always doing, but the willingness to say, yes, I can do this thing that I haven't done before. And yes, I have the confidence myself that I can do that. And think about this for a moment. When I took that role, the entire company knew me as head of compliance. So can you imagine the detractors, the naysayers, the people in HR who were thinking, well, wait a minute. Yeah, she's a great lawyer and she's great but what is she doing leading? So there were several people I had to win over. So you think about that moment when you're offered that opportunity. Do I want to suffer from people thinking I don't belong? Or what are people going to say? I haven't been in HR for 10 years. Should I not take all those things? But because I had vanquished those voices years ago, I did not hesitate to say yes in that moment. So, and I talk about imposter syndrome in my book, but that's what typically keeps women from saying yes to things they haven't done before, is the feeling that they have to be perfect in order to say yes. So not true.
And they don't. I sort of feel this is, just the reaction I'm having to what you said, that there are going to be a lot of listeners and viewers who are going to be inspired by that fact. And if I were to distill it down, what I heard you say is give yourself permission to lean in areas that you don't have full command over, and use that as an opportunity to learn and grow. And again, sort of have the confidence in knowing you're capable of learning and knowing. And I'll just add my own perspective to this, which is one of my favorite phrases is I'll try. I work with a trainer in the gym, and she's like, you want to do this weight, Jeff? And it's like, I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try. So what I'm doing there is I'm setting the expectation that I'm going to give you my integrity and my best effort. And if we don't quite get the outcome we're looking for, I'm going to learn something in the process, and that's going to be valuable.
And I will say, for me, I'm a Star Wars fan, so shout out to all the Star Wars fans. There is no try. I never approach something as try. I'm going to do it. There is no try. There's just do. And so I don't approach it as if I'm going to try to do this thing, and if it doesn't work out, then I'll pivot. I approach it as I am going to be able to do this. I am going to crush this. And in the process, I may stumble and I may have some setbacks, but at the end of the day, I'm going to knock this out the park. I approach everything with that mindset.
I love that distinction. Here's the truth. That's my mindset as well. The I try phrase is about setting the expectations around you that allow you to quiet the imposter syndrome voices.
I agree. That's true.
You tell the people around you, yeah, I'm going to give this a shot. But at the end of the day, the truth is, I know I'm going to get it done one way or another, because that's how I am. I'm not going to drop this ball. There is no circumstance where I'm going to drop this ball. But, in terms of quieting the voices, you sort of put that expectation set out there, like, I'm going to give this my best effort. I don't have experience in HR, but I'm going to bring everything that I bring to the table and give it a shot. And hopefully that will allow people again to sort of have that confidence to lean in when they don't have it previously.
Exactly. And I will say two more controversial things, but I think it's important to stay on this topic for a second. I have an aversion to the lean in phrase, which I won't go into because that's a whole nother topic. But I will say yes. That's the way I like to hear that in my head. And the key that I also knew, I know great talent. The reason why I crushed that job, the reason why I was so excellent at Tesla was not because I was excellent. It's because I knew almost with the instant of him asking me, I knew exactly who my A team was going to be. And they weren't the usual suspects per se. They were people who were in, corners of HR who no one had paid attention to. There were people on the legal team who I thought, who I had, worked with and thought, wow, that person was really good in HR. So I had already been sort of thinking about people and talent and I didn't know why, but I knew at that moment I could do it, not just because of me, but I knew I could assemble an A team. And that's exactly what I did. So I did not do it alone. I knew I could assemble an A team.
See, that goes back to the confidence we were talking about earlier, right? The confidence that you had in your ability to assemble a team that could 100% deliver against expectation. That's the kind of confidence we're looking for.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Tesla and the COVID situation. So, timing, super interesting. You had strong opinions about, what wasn't working with HR. You had an opportunity to voice them. You had the confidence of doing that. And then COVID hit. What was happening? Give our audience a sense of what was happening in the world and in the world of Tesla when COVID came in, and what sort of problems did you see emerging?
Yeah. So what was so interesting about that moment, because I want to take you to like December 2019, where I had this conversation with the CEO and I say yes. And I walk out and I'm, leading 75% of HR. I went back to, my desk and I'm thinking, wow, look at all these great things I'm going to be able to do. Right. I had pitched it. I had all these great programs. I had a great game plan. Essentially, it hit, basically signed off on everything conceptually. So, okay, the world is my oyster. I'm going to take Tesla to where we want to go. And then 2 weeks later, I get a call from, the SVP, Environmental Health and Safety. And she says, I need you on the task force. And I said, COVID's not coming. We called it coronavirus back then. Coronavirus is not coming. It's in Shanghai. She says, no, Valerie, it's going to be in 2 weeks. So think about what just happened to the job I just took. It went from programmatic, employee experience, doing all these work to now I'm keeping people safe and helping the company to continue running. So what the job I took changed in 2 weeks. It changed in 2 weeks. So
an unplanned transformation.
So now everything by March, when the shutdown happened, by March, because remember the whole world is starting to, careen towards this moment where everything is going to stop. So January, I'm thinking, all right, I need to assemble my A team because I know what's coming. So I'm now the people who might have been on A team phase 1, not the people you need in a crisis. So I changed who I was going to, assemble as my direct reports. And then by the time March hits, everything is shut down. The state is telling the county saying we can't open, but the state is saying, well, you might be able to, and the federal government is saying, of course you can. And there's all this noise. And so now I am managing crisis communications. And now I'm looking at what pay. And now I'm looking at work from home, remote work. And now I'm looking at, okay, how do we decide who works, who stays home? Now I'm looking at what's equitable. So in that moment in March, every single HR function was at play. And my heart goes out to, all of those of us who are leading HR during that time, because no time in business was every single function at play at the same exact time. So transforming pay, transforming how you learn, how do you do onboarding, how do you hire folks, what does your recruiting look like? every single thing changes. So now I'm in a whole new world, in a whole new role. But the good thing is, because there was such flux and I didn't have the background, I wasn't constrained by what could be done or what's typically done. It was an open playing field to get stuff done. And that was very freeing for me because there was no playbook. So literally, we were writing the playbook as we did. So everything, and I'll give specifically, we found ourselves when there was a whole shutdown open thing. That's a whole, believe me, it's a major story, but we don't have time for that. But at the end of the day, we were continuing to operate and keep people safe. And then when the rest of the state realized that they could do the same, all of a sudden we're competing for the same talent pool. So if you can imagine going from a world where you're having people build automobiles and there's this talent pool for that, but there's a specific talent pool, and all of a sudden retailers are increasing how much they're paying, and fast food restaurants are increasing how much, and now all of a sudden what you thought was your comp set and your peer set for pay just got literally exploded. And so redoing compensation, rethinking what that means, how to get people to work. I mean, I became a transportation expert, figuring out where the talent was within X amount of hours to our factory and where else we could be recruiting to get people to come in and do work. Everything was on the table. So talk about transformation. I don't even know if that's a strong enough word for what was going on at the time. And for those of us who were CHROs, I mean, I was CHRO. I wasn't, the CEO doesn't like the word chief, but I was a CHRO, make no mistake, during that time. The challenges we had, I feel for everyone who was leading companies at the time, because everything was at play at the same time. Everything. You didn't have the luxury of working on a project. There was no such thing as a project.
It's an unbelievable story. And the truth is, I think probably there were a lot of folks who ended up in similar situations when COVID hit because, to your point, no playbook. There was no precedence for us to look at and figure out, what's the right decision making going forward and what's the right strategy. And so I think a lot of people were sort of on the fly. But doing it with 44,000 employees, that's a little different scale.
Yeah, 44,000 employees. And then the dynamics of, what's happening around the world. There was a social crisis. And so trying to figure out what should we do in the US versus what should we do in the EU versus what should we do in the UK. And so making sure that decisions were hyper focused, and then how do you handle the disparate treatment depending on what local jurisdictions were offering. So my legal background, interestingly enough, was critical for helping me to understand what we could and should be doing, because I didn't have to wait to hear from legal per se. I worked very closely with the GC at the time. He and I countless hours, but I knew I could discern my own interpretation of rules and regulations because I was also a lawyer. So it was so helpful for me to have that skill at the time. I don't think I would have survived if I didn't have a legal background. I would have been the burden of trying to decipher local, state, federal regulations and understand what to do and feel in my heart that I was doing the right thing. I only could do that because I was a lawyer.
I hadn't even thought of that when we were having previous conversations about the COVID implication at Tesla, but that picture makes a ton of sense to me now. Understanding the legal implications of decision making and operational changes, and really the way that I think about it is the potential liabilities that were in play that had to be managed again on a global scale, and then all of the regional legal implications. Unbelievable. Yeah, I had not thought about your legal experience going into running this. Now, you said you might not have survived. I don't believe that, Valerie. I just think it would have taken longer.
Yeah, but the thing is, the speed with which decision making had to get done. Now, interestingly enough, we didn't have AI at the time. I think if we had AI at the time, it would have the stress of running scenarios to get to the right decision would have been greatly mitigated, because we would have had, but we didn't have AI at the time. And so the stress of trying to figure things out, and which interestingly is, and I think it's very important for the audience to know, in retrospect, probably 2 months after we had been open and running, despite whoever said we shouldn't be, the Tesla playbook was used across the country. No one knows that. Like, no one ever mentions that we created the playbook for the safe operation of a major factory during a crisis and kept people safe. And that playbook was used across the country. But in the moment when you're you don't know how that's going to turn out. You don't know what that's. So all you have is your experience, your judgment, and quite frankly, your EQ and your empathy. And the North Star for us is putting people at the center of the decision-making process. What is best for the people? And there were two things: their health and their livelihoods. Those were two things. And so keeping those two things in mind, how do we keep paychecks coming, right? How do we keep the company operating, right? How do we make sure that there is a Tesla? It's so easy now. People forget we literally could have gone under. We literally could. It was so precarious during that time. And so, you don't know if you're making the right decision until hindsight, but in the moment, if you're putting people first, no matter what happens, you will not regret the decisions you made because you were using the right factors to make that decision. And that's why 100 years from now, I'm happy about what I did because people were first in mind.
I love that that was your guidepost. When you think about transformation and the strategy of transformation, you have to understand what's guiding you. And in this case, not only having the clarity, but picking the right guideposts very likely contributed to your success. And then the last thing you said there, which just, hits me right between the eyes. This is part of your legacy now. This is, 100 years from now, while you won't be here to enjoy it, you will leave this earth knowing you did a really good thing.
From a career perspective, that is true. I think from a personal perspective, giving birth to my sons is nothing better than that. But from a career perspective, yes, I am immensely proud of what I did during that time with all the dynamics that were at play. And I will also say, there were moments when you talk about in the room where it happens, I was in the room where decisions happen, and there were 4 people in that room, and I was one of them. And so, I don't have to ever wonder, would I use my voice to do the right thing? I'll never have to ask myself that. I'll never have to ask myself, if my livelihood is on the line, am I going to make the right choice? Because I was in that moment. And really, I will tell a little bit of this. I can't tell the whole story. But there was a moment the first few days after the shutdown, and there's 4 of us in the factory, the lights are off, and we went from a humming spectacular to a eerily ghost-like facility. And we were trying to make a decision on something. And we were in one of the conference rooms. And I had a mentor, by the way, at the company who I learned maybe a year later, who had spoken to Elon about me, which is why I was invited to that meeting in December. I learned later who that was. We almost had a shouting match with each other about something that needed to get done. And I'm thinking, like, this is my mentor, and I don't agree with a word he's saying. And I had to in that moment ask myself, Valerie, if you want to defend your right to be here, you're going to derail this conversation. Because he was questioning my right to be in the room. And he was saying, you just got here and we've been here for 10 years and you're not going to make this decision and tank everything we've worked on. And you've only been here for 3 months. And I thought, if I defend my right to be here, I could win the argument, but lose the battle. The battle is, what's the decision these people in this room should be making? And what's the focus? And what I said was, okay, here's the thing. Months from now, we're going to be known by the decision we are making in this room. I get that I just got here. And in fact, he was standing over me now, sitting down. So it couldn't be more of a horrible power dynamic than that. He's standing over me. And I was calm as a cucumber. And I said, we're going to be known by the decision we make today. How do we want to? Because this is going to be over. This crisis is going to end. And I will tell you, the reason why no one knows what happened in that room is because we made the right decision. Had we made the wrong decision, the world would have known. So the other lesson that I learned in that moment was you're going to do great things and no one's going to see it but you. No one's going to see it but you. And so you have to be okay with, being, spectacular in secret. You're not always going to be able to shine a light, but what I love about that moment, and we made up after that, and he I could go to his house for dinner, tomorrow, but we made up after that. But in that moment, it was heated, and rightfully so, because literally the company could have gone under, which people forget. Um, but what well, a lot at stake. But what's important in that in those moments of when you're leading a transformation or leading, or you have a stake in where the company's going to go at that moment, you have to remember what's most important is getting the thing done, not salvaging yourself or your pride or your reputation. Because if you choose that lane, you could win the battle but lose the war. And so one of the most important things I knew in the moment when I was sitting there and he's like yelling at me, I'm thinking, if I go toe to toe with this guy, this conversation is going off the rails. So while he's saying his thing, I'm thinking, how do we get the right decision made? And so what I'm most proud about, people will never see. Like they'll never. If I wasn't in how many years later? It's like 6 years later. This is the first time I'm actually talking about this in this large one. But talk about 100 years from now, when people read books or whatever, and they'll know we did the right things, but they won't know what it took in those moments to the right. But I do.
Yeah, it'll end up being a case study in business school, right? The test of the COVID event.
100 years or 50 years from now, but that's leading transformations when you're the new guy and you're right, and figuring how to change hearts and minds. But again, I will say, as a lawyer, I was making the legal argument. I was making the legal case. I wasn't defending myself. I was making a legal. Here are the things we need to consider before we make this decision. And I get that I'm new, and I get that I just got to this role. But here are things I was counseling that here are things you need to consider if you make that decision. What are we going to be known for at the end of the day? So again, I beg to differ. I think being a lawyer, Jeff, I don't know how I would have got through that job without legal reasoning, as in my toolkit. I just don't know.
Yeah, yeah, fair. One of the things you're talking about is one of the things that's actually pretty close to me and what I do. It falls under the banner of healthy conflict, and understanding the dynamics of conflict, understanding the dynamics of, how people show up to conflict. And then how do we calibrate around focusing on the right thing and not the wrong thing? And you did that instinctively. And again, I think that's one of those innate characteristics that you're bringing to the conversation, that you're bringing to the table, to be able to say, listen, I can make this about me, but then we're going to end up in the wrong place. Or I can make it about what our mission and what our strategy is, with that guiding principle of doing the right thing for our people. And we're going to come to the right conclusion. And that's exactly what happened here.
Yeah. And I'd made horrible decisions earlier on in my career. So I wouldn't say instinct. I would say learning by doing the wrong thing. Earlier in my career, when I was a vice president, my first role, I made some really missteps. And what's great about it is, I was able to leave the company in great stead. I could go back today. So the steps weren't fatal in terms of me being able to go back, but there were some miscalculations I made in how I managed some interpersonal conflict that I learned from. And I'll tell you really quick what I learned from that first VP role. What I learned from that is, if someone is treating you a certain way and they are disrespecting you, there's two things you can do. You can focus on how it's personally impacting you and really focus on how it is undermining you and your ability, or you can say, what is going on in that person's life or career that is making them treat me this way? I didn't do that. I focused on, oh, woe is me. And what did I do? And why does this person not like me? Had I focused on what was driving that behavior, I couldn't have fixed it all, but I could have fixed my response to it, and it could have helped our relationship not just tank. So having experienced that, I learned from that experience, when something's not going well and you're feeling attacked, focus on what's really going on in the room. Like when, couples argue, it's not about the toaster. It's not about the lawn. It's something else.
It's never about the thing.
It's never that thing. And I learned, and thank goodness I learned that back then. So in that moment when truly lives were at stake, I wasn't focused on, oh, how could he talk to me that way? I belong here. I'm a lawyer. I didn't have any of that thoughts going through my head. I'm thinking, we're going to make the right decision today. How do I get them to focus on the right decision?
I love this segment, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that I and in my organization often coaches on when we talk about conflict is exactly that. When there's conflict, and especially if it's directed at you as an individual, or it's become a little more personal than it should be, you're going to feel how you feel. I want you to honor the fact that didn't feel good, or it felt bad, or however it felt. That's true. That's not the focal point, though. The focal point is, what do you do next? That's the thing you should be focusing on. And my recommendation is always exactly what you just said, which is become a diagnostician. Ask yourself this question: what's happening right now, and why is it happening right now? And what you're going to find is it has nothing to do with you, and it has everything to do with what's happening around you or the people involved. And if you can tune into that place, first of all, it takes you out of your emotional brain and it puts you into your logical brain, which is a really healthy place to be. But then you can start figuring out, okay, what's going on here and what can I do about it in a way that turns to success? So again, you did that learned, I'll call it instinct, but it's maybe educated instinct. You did that and nailed it. And again, that's the model that we teach. I love that story.
Yeah, I hadn't told that. That's you're a good interviewer, Jeff. I told him a few times, but it's a rare that I share that. But it's usually you need time and context to really feel that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. And you said something else earlier that was on my mind. Oh, and now it's slipped my mind. So if it comes back, I'll refocus on it. Let's transition over to Handshake, one of your previous employers. They were struggling with finding talent, and maybe I'm framing this the wrong way. Maybe the mission was, how do they up level finding talent and find the best talent, which again, a lot of our audience is going to be very interested in hearing. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Almost. So Handshake was founded by CEO and founder Garrett Lord and his partners, and it is a company, a thriving company. It is, I don't know if we didn't like to say this, but it is. It's the LinkedIn for the early career set, and it was how to help employers find the best talent. So it is a platform that is designed to help employers who are looking for great talent find them in a centralized location in a very meaningful way. The problem they were solving was democratizing access to opportunity. Every company, I don't care if you're in financial services, you're in law, you're in tech, every company goes to like 5 colleges or 10 colleges or 20 colleges, the same set to find their talent. And the Handshake premise was, and is, they're doing phenomenally right now because they're also doing AI, is you have to look beyond your normal set to truly know whether you're finding exceptional talent. If you're not looking everywhere, you are not finding the best talent. And what we would say is, excellence is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And so it enabled companies to, go onto the platform and search for talent. And there's some, sophomore in Wichita, Kansas, who would never get a look from a major, Mag 7 company, gets a look from a Mag 7 company because their profile is on Handshake, and Handshake recruits them, and Handshake enables the recruitment. And then that Mag 7 company gets top talent. That is, and now you multiply that by, there's 18 million students on that platform. Every one of the Fortune 500 is one of their clients, and all colleges and universities, 90% of them across the country have their students on that platform. So it literally is the place where early career gets their first job, and it's the place where talent is found. The key for me was when I joined as a lawyer. So I joined Handshake to found their in-house legal team. But what happened, I also wrote a book, the first edition, on quantum progression, the art and science of career advancement in the age of AI, because I was concerned that the AI train was going to leave the station and most of the people would not be on board because they didn't understand how important it was for a career. A month later, ChatGPT came out. So I was no longer crazy. I was crazy before that, but then I was no longer crazy. But saying the sky is falling, AI is coming. But when I joined Handshake, because of my experience at Tesla, CHROs, CEOs, talent executives wanted to talk to me about recruiting. How do you recruit? How do you find early talent? What are the different ways you do that? How is AI going to impact the, careers? What should we be doing? And so my job morphed while I was there. So I went from chief legal officer to chief talent engagement officer. And I spent the bulk of the almost 4 years I was there consulting, if you will, to C-level executives on how to find early talent, particularly AI focused, AI fluent early talent, and how to scale their recruiting strategies and pivot or make new decisions according to what was happening in the marketplace. It was a great job. Loved it.
It's interesting because, one of my TA strategies, it's super easy to understand, that I've recommended, actually for decades now, pre-COVID and all of that, is go to where the talent is. Right. If you're trying to build the highest performing team that you can, or the highest performing organization, go to where the talent is. Remove those geographical, or, the example you've given, sourcing limitations that are traditional. Go to where the talent is and you will win. And it sounds like you've incorporated that into your philosophy as well.
It was the whole premise of Handshake. The talent is on the platform. So you literally do not have to physically go anywhere. But like I said, that junior who's graduating, that rock star junior at that school in Tallahassee, Florida, who, a consulting firm would never have looked at, gets to see that amazing profile of that amazing student and recruits them for their internship. Would not happen without Handshake. So you're exactly right. Go to where the talent is, and the thing is, they're on the Handshake platform. Wonderful company.
And what's the name of your book?
My book it's long, Quantum Progression, the art and science of career advancement in the age of AI. And this is the Quantum Leap edition. So it's very important to get the new edition, the Quantum Leap edition, because I wrote the original in 2023. The world changed a year later. And I thought, man, I cannot believe my book aged so quickly. I have to get another one out. And so I just released my new version in November, and I'm so glad I did. But I did really quick. What's so cool is, like I said, when I released the first one, there were crickets at first, because like, oh, AI of everything, AI careers, Valerie, being a little alarmist. ChatGPT comes out, and all of a sudden I'm speaking all over the world about AI and early careers and how it's going to impact the workforce, which is where the Forbes Women of Power Summit invitation came from, which I'm so thrilled about. And now my new version is out. I'm so proud of this version, because this is what you need for 2026. This is the playbook for everybody. I don't care if you're in college or you're a C-level executive. This is the playbook.
Love it. And I'm gonna just flash the URL up where viewers can find the book to order. I'm gonna get my order placed for it today.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, it's everywhere where books are sold.
Awesome. And since we're talking about AI, I want to wrap in, one other segment here. It's the work that you're doing currently at Empower Pharmacy, which is really from a transformation standpoint, if I understand this right, looking to bring AI into all of the functions of HR organization wide. And in addition to that, integrating AI fluency into the organization itself. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and how blessed am I to have a job where I'm working for a company. At the end of the day, we are responsible for making sure that people don't have to choose between paying their rent and affording medication. Like that's what we do. And we personalize medication so that if you, and just making this up, but if there's a medication that you take that has calcium in it, but you can't take it because there's calcium in it, we'll make it without calcium. And so, and it's affordable. So I love the mission of the company, but alongside that, the work that I get to do is I am leading the HR function, and we're doing two things. We are transforming our HR tech stack, the entire tech stack. So that's recruiting platform, employee relations, that is learning and development. That's everything that we do. I am AIing it by swapping out archaic platforms and bringing in state-of-the-art AI. So transforming the entire tech stack, HR tech stack, which is fantastic. Then also creating a program where we are developing an AI fluency curriculum where everyone in the company will be not just know AI or know about AI, will be AI fluent. And I love the term AI fluent because that means, if you are an English speaking person and you learn and study Spanish and you want to become fluent, that means you are conversant in all things in that language in Spanish and you can speak about on any topic. Same for AI fluency. That's where we're going to get the company. So to be able to work on not just the tech stack, but to make sure that everyone in the company is AI fluent, when my personal mission is ensuring that no one gets left behind in the age of AI. I mean, really, what better job could I be doing right now?
Love it. I'm guessing, I'm assuming that a lot of the CHROs who will be listening or tuning into this podcast are at some in some portion or on some level thinking about AI. If you had to think about the number one thing, this is, what's shaping your strategy around AI adoption and the transformation in your tech stack, what's the guiding principle or guiding strategy there?
The guiding principle for me that I would recommend, and I'm sure most CHROs are already there, is AI is not about how do we replace human work. It is how do we make human work excellent? How do we make humans better at what they do? For me, that's the way to win. That is the way to win when you are telling your organization, look, you can be 10 times better at what you do by when you learn this tool, and you don't have to work until midnight to get this done. You can be done at 5 o'clock. That's to be the guiding principle. The guiding principle 1A is the last mile of everything you do has to be led by a human. There is no decision making that should be owned by AI. AI should be able to, if it's a 100-meter run, 95 meters should be by AI. And that last 5 meters that's where the human excellence comes from. That's why domain expertise matters. That's why subject matter expertise matters. That's why college and higher education still matter, because we need domain experts coming out of school who know how to question AI. And so I would say those are the two most important things to look for. But if you're not on the AI train yet, get on it. And I will say, if there is a committee at your company, and AI be on the committee. If you're a CHRO or vice president level, even director level, those decisions should not be made without HR having a seat at the table.
Oof, love that. Love that perspective. When you think about resources, maybe resources that you're currently using, whether they're external or internal, what are some of the tools and resources that you're bringing to bear on this transformation?
So it's I'm like a kid in the candy store right now when it comes to AI. The ability to source for the types of platforms that I believe we should be using, to have vendor demonstrations and to identify what we need and to be able to choose, yes, that's what we need. It's heaven right now. And so the resources are, you don't have to, it's not a blank textbook is not necessarily needed, because there are great tools in every price range. That's the most important thing to understand. So you shouldn't be intimidated if you're a CHRO saying, I can't replace my tech stack. We don't have a budget at all. I will promise you there is a tool to do the thing you need to get done that is not going to cost a fortune. And as competition continues to heat up, the prices are going to continue to go down as AI effectiveness increases. And so don't assume you can't make these tech changes by assuming that you can't afford to make the changes. Go shopping and use my four favorites, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok. Use those four to help you shop.
Right. Yeah, you start using AI to help with the decision making. When you think about this transformation at Empower Pharmacy, how will you know when it's successful?
I love that. My boss, the president, asked me the same thing. I love that. We have metrics. Like I have goals. One of my goals is 100% of the company AI fluent by X date. Like that's a very concrete, very measurable outcome. That is one of the ways I will know I'm successful. If I can walk in the corridor or be on a Teams call and I ask someone randomly, how did you use AI today? How did it help you do your job better? And everyone has an answer. That's when I know I've done what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, nice. I love that. Valerie, I want to pivot away from the transformation stories and talk about you a little bit more. Some of my favorite questions that I love to ask my guests, and this is actually my very favorite one, is when you think about all of the advice that you've received over your lifetime, what piece of advice did you get and didn't take?
Didn't take. Actually, it came from myself, and it was when I was in law school, and I was a summer associate at a Wall Street law firm, and I knew I shouldn't accept that offer. I, the money was so good, and the cachet of being a Wall Street attorney and having made it, I knew I shouldn't have taken that job. I lasted 6 months at that company, and because of that, in retrospect, it worked out great. But I spent 10 years not in law. I spent 10 years in marketing and communications because I thought I hated law. When what it really was, I was fish out of water, and I talk about this in my book too. I was at the wrong place. Not that I didn't, but I should have listened to myself because I knew I should not say yes to that offer. But it was just too much.
What did you learn from that experience?
Don't chase money. Don't chase money. I mean, it's a luxury, quite frankly. Quite frankly, it's also a kind of privileged thing to say. But I will say, if you make a decision based solely on money, be prepared to regret it.
I love that. Gosh, I love that perspective. For me, what it comes down to is, making good decisions for the right reasons and having clarity around that. And in this particular example, chasing money is the wrong input for decision making.
It really is. And like I said, it's a luxury, and I totally get that. But I could have made a different decision, and I didn't, because of optics and pride and wanted to show what I could do and wanted to validate myself. Every wrong instinct that should be used to make a career decision, I used to make that decision. Every wrong instinct.
This reminds me a little bit of what I was thinking about earlier around making mistakes. I work with a lot of senior level folks who are really, really afraid of making the wrong mistake. And, in the short term, I understand, especially if there are business implications to a wrong mistake. But when we pull back, here's the truth. The mistakes you make create the wisdom that you have. And so not making mistakes, there's a sterility to that I think sort of steals wisdom in later life. And so I'm a fan, and also failure is such an excellent teacher. And so I'm a fan of making mistakes and, hearing your story about, making decisions for the wrong reasons and then learning from it is a really good example of that.
Yeah. And understanding what is a mistake. fear of making a mistake
Is the mistake.
is a mistake, is a mistake in and of itself. And was it really a mistake? Just because it didn't turn out right or didn't go the way you planned it, or it doesn't mean your decision was wrong. So it's really understanding the outcome does not determine whether or not the decision was right. That's not how it's, did you use the right inputs to make the decision? And therefore, if the outcome is not what you expected, that's okay. But you should question, what were your inputs? And I talk a lot about that when I talk about AI. What AI does for us now is it gives us the opportunity to get so many of the inputs correct, which can minimize the chances of something going wrong. My boss, my president, my company calls it impossible to fail. AI can really help you, minimize the potential for something to not go well. But it doesn't mean you made a mistake in the first place. So you got to be easier. You got to be less hard on yourself when things don't go right. Oh, that was such a mistake. I never should have done it. Well, no, if you had the right decision, if you chose that company for the right reasons, or you chose that project for the right reasons, or you chose that employee for the right reasons and it didn't work out, it doesn't mean that it was a mistake. It just means that sometimes things aren't going to go the way you plan, no matter how well you plan.
It's the unknown variables. Yeah, that are going to drive. But I also really, my brain, if we were doing an fMRI right now, my brain is probably lighting up over this concept of the input, in relation to the output in traditional decision making, and then how closely the importance of that transfers over to AI. AI, what you get from AI is only as good as what you give in terms of the input and the questions, right?
For sure.
That's really interesting. Gosh, we could have a whole episode on that, by the way, Valerie.
We could. And real quick, one of the things I posted about, I think it was yesterday, was, we have, people being afraid to use AI because it somehow diminishes them. It somehow makes them feel like they're not doing a great job. I literally had a conversation 2 days ago. I got to really anonymize this. I had a team member do something for me, and the work they gave back was not great. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this, put it into ChatGPT, take that, put it into ChatGPT, get the response, and then what the output is, show me that. Twice that person came back to me and I could tell he hadn't done it. The third time I said, okay, listen, I'm going to say this one more time. This is what I need you to do. And the crestfallen look when that person reluctantly knew they were going to have to use AI, I thought, why is this person looking so downtrodden? That's not a slight against how great you are. You're on my team because you're awesome. You're great. So the person did it. It came back. It was fabulous. 99% done. And it's okay. Now that that's done, here's 3 problems I need you to help me walk through. And we were able to spend, and then I could see the light coming on when they were realizing, oh, I shouldn't have spent all that time on project A when Valerie needs me to think through B. And I saw the light come on. But this is the torturous process of getting people to be comfortable with AI because they think it diminishes their contributions, when what it really does is enable us to focus on the things that only humans can do. We've got to make our peace with it. But the struggle that person had, and the way they felt that I was almost saying, you can't do this without AI, which I could tell that's what they were gleaning from the conversation. But then we spent 3 hours talking about something that really mattered and just beating it up and having conversation. And then the person got it.
Love it. Love that conclusion. Sounds like pretty traditional behavioral change dealing with psychological resistance.
Yes.
Which is a chapter in my upcoming book.
Awesome.
Well, Valerie, I have to tell you, I have absolutely loved this conversation. The insights, the energy, the perspectives, fantastic and phenomenal. I'm so appreciative that you've joined us today.
I am honored. It was a wonderful conversation, Jeff. Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. How, if people wanted to get in touch with you, is LinkedIn the best place to connect?
LinkedIn is the best place. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I always accept connections. I love meeting new people. I produce what I think is a lot of very interesting content. And so I'd love to connect with folks on LinkedIn. Love it.
Awesome. Valerie, thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure. Thank you so much.
The Transformational Leadership Podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes vision, action, diagnostics, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to let us know in the comments. We'd love you to join the conversation and help us transform the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are transforming organizations, leaders, and teams. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.